This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Thanks everyone for joining this week's episode of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. This week, riding solo. Adam is cruising, having a good time on vacation with his family. Much deserved. Man is grinding, man is working hard, podcasting, doing everything that he does. So for him to take time away and to spend time with family is amazing. So it's just me riding solo this week on Doc and Jock, episode 497. We are 3 weeks away from episode 500. That means I got to start after this recording, after I hit stop, do all the editing, and send it off to the editors as well. Then I got to start actually planning a big show, episode 500 in 3 weeks. That means the end of February, early March, we will drop episode 500, which means nearly 10 years of podcasting. We started this around September of 2013. We are now in 2023, and we have been dropping Doc and Jock, for those of you that are new, because we pick up new subscribers each and every week, and I thank you so much for hitting the like and subscribe button across all the various platforms where you can listen to podcasts. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to fire up the mic and hit record that it's great, but episode 497 is now being recorded 3 weeks away from episode 500. It's amazing. It's a nice opportunity to be able to drop knowledge, talk about Detroit sports, talk about the journey and the fun ride that has been this project. I can't believe that we've put out a podcast, Doc and Jock, every single Thursday for nearly 10 years. It's crazy. No breaks, no time off. Even if Adam is away, if he's on international duty, if he's been in Brazil or we've had family obligations, one of us has turned on the microphone and spit into it in order to bring the content. And it's been great to grow it and to be able to work with various partners. So it's great. Maybe even Adam will listen. My hope is that he'll be sitting, on a cot, just growling, just getting all pissed off, because if I know Adam, 5 days away from work is not something he was looking forward to doing. So I'm curious to see if he fires it up and shoots me a tweet from wherever he is in the world. I'm curious to check in with my guy when he gets back next week to see what he did. Did he end up surviving? What happened? Everything that involves vacation, because it's fun. You get to live vicariously through people that love to travel, because for me, I just am not about the travel life. I was just telling somebody the other day, I feel like I'm due. In my life traveling, maybe I've been on 10 flights my whole life. And each time it's been very successful, had great trips, nobody flipped out, nobody was having a tantrum, no big delays, no luggage sent overseas and never came back. So I was telling someone, I don't like to travel. I hate it. I hate the whole process. I feel like it doesn't suit the way in which I need to get down. So it's been like 6 years since I've even gotten on a plane. Everywhere I want to go, I just get in the car and drive. I can drive 24 hours. It has no bearing on my life when you can sit in the car, listen to sports radio, listen to talk radio, listen to music, talk to the family. You can do so many things behind the wheel where you're in control that it makes it so much better for me than it is to wait an hour and a half at the gate at the airport. Even if it's a 2-hour flight to Florida, I'd rather drive 25 hours. So, I'm due for a disaster that you see on the internet every day, with someone tripping out, some animal doing some crazy thing to bring the plane down, to have the flight not make it to where it needs to go. So for me, I am not about that life. So to live vicariously through those that take trips, it's great. But soon, maybe this year, obviously with the Detroit Lions, it's great, because if the Lions, and so far I'm scheduled to enter year 5 to cover them fully for All Lions and SI.com. I'm so thrilled, so honored to be part of that team. It's crazy that, one, they work with me and partnered with me And two, they stuck with me through all the ups and downs and the craziness and everything that's happened. They're a great partner. And potentially, I was telling people that, now throughout the first 5 years of covering the Lions, I really didn't have any concern that the team was going to make the postseason. So there was no planning in regards to postseason travel. Absolutely none. I knew pretty much for the most part heading into 2022, this Lions team projected to win 7-8 games in the NFC is still not good enough for the most part to get in. 9-8 was not good enough even. So you look at it, but in 2023, all that's changed. If the Lions do indeed make the postseason, then it's very likely your guy's going to get on that plane, whether it be to Minnesota, Dallas, which I'm kind of hoping, maybe San Francisco out in the West Coast. We'll see. But the opportunity will present itself for me to cover the Detroit Lions in the postseason, probably here in the next few years. So I'm hoping for that opportunity. I'm hoping for that opportunity to see many more meaningful games like we did in 2022. It just adds that pressure. It adds the intrigue, maybe an opportunity, just maybe for once, to have a home playoff game in 2023. It would mean so much. And I think everything's building towards that. When I look at everything with the Lions, things are trending in such a great direction that my ass has to prepare for a postseason trip. It's going to happen. I maybe even take a couple during the season. I've been lucky in that I get to cover the Lions and make my own schedule and do the things I need to do to cover the team and to spend time with the family. The perfect work-life balance I have achieved. And it's been great. It's been a great opportunity to see how the Lions, starting with the first draft that Brad Holmes held, to see them build this current version. This version that has lots of players talking in great ways. I mean, Jamal Williams on Wednesday, he did the interview circuit from ESPN to Jim Rome to talking to the team website to NFL Network. He told ESPN because, and I'll briefly touch on it with the whole nonsense with Aaron Rodgers and everybody's tripping out reaction to it. He said, and Stephen A. Smith, I believe, asked Jamal Williams, you guys got to compete now with the Vikings and the Packers and maybe even the Packers again with Aaron Rodgers. And Jamal Williams was confident, and he told Stephen A. Smith and the country, he said, we taking the North. The North, the seasons are changing, and now there's a new team that needs to be in that spot, and that's the Detroit Lions. And that's all you can ask for is a team that's confident. I mean, why wouldn't you be? I hope that the Lions are, in fact, going to do it with Jamal Williams. He adds a spice that is so unique, so much energy, so much positivity, a great leader in the locker room, somebody that's emerging, that wants to do more in the passing game, wants to do more even in the running game. Told a funny story in that his goal was around 7-8 touchdowns for the entire 2022 season. Now, he breaks through that pretty quickly as he became basically the primary red zone target when the Lions got close. And he got 17 touchdowns, averaged one rushing touchdown a game. And he set the Lions franchise mark, and he put himself in such a great position to have a good year that maybe another team will make that phone call and decide to give him an offer. But I do think when all is said and done, you can't move on from Jamal Williams. I think he is an integral part of that locker room, a leader, somebody that can set the tone on and off the field. So I expect the odds are 70% that Jamal Williams will return and work towards setting the tone early for the Detroit Lions. I think it'll be serious, it'll be important, and it'll be something very interesting for the Detroit Lions moving forward when you look at everything that's going on with the franchise now as they work through free agency and the draft. This is the best time because we get to see the next phase of Brad Holmes' development. And now everybody's talking about it. How should this Detroit Lions team approach the offseason? It's very important. It's very interesting that the Lions got to this point to be a winning football team in just 2 seasons. But now this is the critical juncture. This is the critical offseason for the Detroit Lions, and here's why. Now all the talk is there. Now all the expectations are starting to rise. Now everybody is starting to pay attention to the Lions. They want to talk to the Lions players, front office, Dan Campbell. They want to know about this young team that probably is going to be featured a lot more in prime time, I think, in 2023. I think when the schedule comes out, everybody will be happy. I think you should expect a Monday Night Football game, maybe even a Sunday Night Football game, at the very least, more exposure for the Detroit Lions. One, because of Dan Campbell, and two, the players have a unique swagger and a story that can be told about resilience, especially with Jared Goff. You got Jamal Williams. You got now this young, hopefully very talented wide receiver that will produce on the field in Jamison Williams. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown in an offensive line. You got a defense led by Aiden Hutchinson and maybe another addition, another talented defensive lineman that can do some things. So this offseason's key. This offseason is very key in my mind for Brad Holmes and that front office, but there has been some changes, and we'll talk about that as well in regards to the Lions adding a new tight ends coach, adding a new running backs coach with the departure of Deuce Staley. It's interesting in that each and every year you hope that a team can bring everybody together back, the roster, the coaches. It just doesn't work that way. And Dan Campbell said it. He said it's going to be a new team in 2023. And lo and behold, we hear the news that Deuce Staley is leaving the organization to join the Carolina Panthers. So you get 3 new additions on the coaching staff. Dre Bly is now going to come in and handle the defensive backs. You have a former NFL tight end going to be joining the coaching staff as well to work with Ben Johnson. So I look at it and I say, oh boy, it's unique in that, you feel like, I know assistants turn over pretty regularly, but it was a little bit surprising, obviously, to see that, Deuce Staley was an assistant head coach. Not only was he the running backs coach, he had a role. He was somebody that was trending toward becoming a head coach. And it's unfortunate that personal matters had to arise. That takes him away. But Steve Hyden joins as well. You get Scotty Montgomery, a former wide receiver in the National Football League, worked with Jonathan Taylor. So he's seen what some of the greats in the game do at the running back spot. So I expect that, the blocking will continue to improve. I suspect that reading and recognizing holes and the ability to make and extend plays to get additional yards should be targeted. And the running game will not drop off. I think will excel working with Scotty Montgomery as well as his ascent, his desire, his strong desire. Maybe he's, in line. Potentially now you have another option if you see how he operates and conducts his business. If Ben Johnson leaves, you have the next guy in line, which all signs would point to, I think, Scotty Montgomery or Tanner Engstrand potentially running the offense. So I'm not as concerned as maybe many people are regarding the turnover, because I think when you have a strong head coach that can deliver the message and it trickles down through the coaches and you have good people in the room, in the locker room, I think it's going to translate. I don't think that the Lions are going to have a big drop-off. I think that they're poised for success and they have the necessary pieces to handle business. Now you're going to see what Brad Holmes can do, and I'm so curious to see who he prioritizes with a little bit of extra cash. $16 million more in salary cap space due to the increase in the league spending. Most teams were already operating under the $225 million or so cap number, so that's been kind of reported a lot in regards to the 13 to 16 million or so that the Lions do have. They could create 25 million more by letting go of some players, cap casualties as we call them. So there's going to be some funds. Does he still give out? He says he's still going to give out those one-year deals or short-term deals. I'm curious if that strategy takes hold, because there are players that have ties to the Saints in the past that you could target and spend some money on. And I'm curious to see how aggressive is Brad Holmes. How close do they see? Because, there are players you could trade for, players you could sign in free agency that could help this football team. But obviously, it's very clear. Everybody knows that this football team needs help on defense. And the part that everybody is clamoring for, and I think that is an interesting debate to have, is should the Lions, where in the draft should they address the cornerback spot? Should they address that spot early? Because you get Devin Witherspoon, you get the likes of Kaylee Ringo, You get the likes of Christian Gonzalez. There are a lot of defensive backs that you can target to bring to this roster. How soon do you want to do that, though? Because you could maybe look further down in the draft and look for other under-the-radar talent that you scouted at the Senior Bowl or will scout at the Combine. I tend to believe that the pattern that we've seen with Brad Holmes will hold true to form. First pick, slams the table, is Penei Sewell. Next pick falls right in your lap. Number 2 is Aiden Hutchinson. So you hit a key piece on the offensive line in year 1, and you hit a key piece on the defensive line in year 2. So I can't imagine right now the only position that we can maybe enter the conversation at 6 is, would he do it? Would he draft? Would Brad Holmes draft a quarterback? That's the position where you could entertain it. I don't think he'll ever do it. I think he'll look further down because just based off of history, and that's all you can go by the first couple years, you would tend to believe that he's going to basically look to shore up the interior of the defensive line. I think you look at a Tyree Wilson, you look at a Brise, you look at a versatile defensive lineman that can play multiple spots, that can become the disruptor. And that helps so much to help Aleem McNeil, to help Aiden Hutchinson. You saw John Kaminsky and you saw Isaiah Buggs, but if those guys can be relegated to solid depth players, wow. If they can get a role and then you add supreme talent to that defensive line, now you're cooking. You got James Houston, Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, another draft pick. You bring back Charles Harris and Romeo Okwara, Isaiah Buggs, John Kaminsky in a lesser role. Now you're cooking. Now you're talking business. Romeo Okwara might be somebody that ends up being a cap casualty because of the fact you have Aiden and now James Houston emerging kind of makes it so that Austin Bryant and Romeo Okwara might, and then you have the young Julian Okwara who still has untapped potential. What level of involvement will his development look like now with additional draft picks? But I do think my initial gut reaction, if you were to ask me, what position will the Detroit Lions target with the number 6 pick? It'll be defensive line. I think the second pick maybe is the one where Brad Holmes again gets aggressive. Does he move up? Does he like Joey Porter, Christian Gonzalez? Does a quarterback fall in that 14 to 15 range that just shocks everybody? Is Anthony Richardson just dropping and you suspect that he's going to be there at number, 14, 13, and you just absolutely fall in love with him based on your evals? So we'll see. I do think that Brad Holmes likes to pick up the phone and likes to make deals. Could I throw it out there? Should I tease it? Do you think, because you have to say it, because he did pick up the phone and call the Vikings, would Brad Holmes decide, okay, sitting there, should I have some conversations with the Bears and see about the number 1 spot? Just go get your guy. You got to remember that he was part of the Rams when they handled business and they traded with the Titans. You got to recall, Rams traded up for Jared Goff and got him. Rams traded up, I think, in 2016 to get Jared Goff. And let's look at the deal. Rams traded up. They sent, on April 14th, 2016, the Rams sent their first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, a third-round pick, a 2017 first-round pick, and a 2017 third-round pick to the Titans in exchange for the number 1 overall pick, a 4th-round pick, and a 6th-rounder. And with that, they decided to pick up Jared Goff. They had their guy. It would be crazy to make a blockbuster trade with Goff on the roster, but would you do that with Bryce Young? The factor that you got to look at is Jamison Williams. Does he want his old quarterback on the Lions? Does he talk? Does he say, hey, get this guy? Does he have a vote? Probably not a big time vote, but Bryce Young, would you make that move? There's a precedent, Les Snead is on record now, F them picks, but I don't see it to that degree. I think that the strategy has been talked about to be a little bit more in line with building through the draft, not giving up future capital, because that's the delicate balance of now you strike while the iron's hot, because the league is made to kind of build, then go all in, making trades and things like that, and then sacrificing for a couple years, and then dipping for a couple of years and then building back up. That's how the league is set up. Are the Lions at that point where they need to go all in? No. They're still in development mode where they got to learn how to win in the playoffs. So that'll be the next step. If this was 2025, I could see it. I could see the same scenario if they would come off a playoff loss and Jared Goff was struggling and you needed to kind of get that momentum back. I could see it. But I think that Brad Holmes is going to be somebody that takes this very seriously and looks to add as much talent as possible. Now, could he package a couple picks here and there to move up or down in the first round or secure one or two more picks? I could see some action with that number 18 pick. I could definitely see it. I could see teams calling up and maybe Brad Holmes getting down into the late 20s based on the evaluation that they have, based on what they need. Maybe a cornerback dips, maybe a running back. I don't see it. I think he goes in line with a lot of other teams where you can find talented running backs later on in the draft. I think you go defensive line, linebacker. If you can, you go potentially Tyree Wilson and Joey Porter would be amazing as well. I think that you look at all that's involved. There's a lot of players that I think fit what the Lions are looking for. A lot. Joey Porter Jr., I think, is somebody that has the potential to be a solid contributor right away. That's what you need. Solid contributors right away. 22-year-old. He's a cornerback. But is there a linebacker, a Trenton Simpson, that impresses the Lions? See, that's the thing I'm curious about is what position. It's going to be on defense. What position do they target? Linebacker, cornerback, in what spot? Joey Porter looks like a solid player at cornerback. Trenton Simpson, a name that's bantied about. And as we continue to evaluate other linebackers, maybe a Sewell comes into the mix later on in the draft. So you guys got to remember, while the talk will be heavy at the top, I'm curious to see what positions on the offense. Obviously, guard at some point. You're going to need to address some depth on the offensive line. But when you look at, in totality, the trust is very high in Brad Holmes. The level of analysis that he can bring in scouting and along with the team that he's put together has many people confident that, wow, the 2022 draft hit on a lot. Now, you're not going to hit on that high a percentage every single time, but moving forward, you have to trust Brad Holmes. You have to trust in the management of the Detroit Lions right now based on what you've seen. Nothing's indicated, obviously, that they don't know how. Nothing's indicated that they're going to take a step backwards or that they're going to fall off a cliff. I think it's realistic to think 10-7 with a bunch of wins at home and a bunch of nail-biters on the road. To look at it in totality, to backtrack a little bit, I just think that with Brad Holmes and the scouting department, I think they're going to look at, in totality, everything at the Senior Bowl and then the upcoming Combine that can help to put together their draft board. And I think it's going to be an effective one. I think that this is the time to trust the Lions front office, and it bodes well for what's going to happen. I'm excited to see the Combine. I'm excited to see how it all shakes out with the Detroit Lions, what comes out of the interviews with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, who are scheduled to speak at the Combine as they do annually. So it's a good time to trust the Lions, and I think in the coming weeks, as we look at and continue our scouting reports at All Lions, you can get an inside glimpse and as much information as possible regarding how the Lions are going to move forward in 2023. Now, with the last 5 minutes, I just got to touch on one topic that's kind of dominated the hockey world here in these parts, and that's the continued discussion, speculation online between Steve Yzerman and Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin, stand-up guy, doesn't want to negotiate publicly, kind of has said that to reporters that he does not want to be that kind of person that puts the dirty laundry out there. But there's a standstill. He wants 8 or more, and Steve Yzerman is set at $8 million, and Dylan Larkin wants $8 million or more over a long-term deal. He wants $8.5 to $9 million because the market has been set. So Steve Yzerman tends to work slow in these negotiations, takes a couple of days off here and there, reflects. But I do believe the reports that have come out indicating that he's stuck at $8 million for Dylan Larkin. I agree. I think that is the case. I see that Dylan Larkin potentially maybe is looking for a neighborhood of $9 million annual salary over the next 8 years. So that's another $9 million that he wants. $8 to $9 million. Obviously, he wants $1 million more over 8 years. Could they come together by the trade deadline? I think it could happen. I could see it happen for sure. I do believe that the negotiation is not as acrimonious as maybe people think it is. I think it's professional. I think that Steve Yzerman has a value set. And what's interesting is he doesn't believe that Dylan Larkin is worth $8.5 or $9 million per season. I'm curious to see where that shakes out with the Lions and how that is going to play out. But the question you got to ask yourself, and let us know at Detroit Podcast, do you think that Dylan Larkin is worth that much money annually per year? I don't. See, I just don't see that. I see a situation in which I see a negotiation taking place. I see a long-term negotiation taking place, but I don't see this getting resolved anytime soon. They still got 3 weeks to negotiate. So I'm curious to see how it will shake out in the coming days and weeks. Now, here's the ugly side of it. If it doesn't get resolved and it goes on until the end of the regular season, does Dylan Larkin take offense to that and end up deciding he needs to leave? Does he say, I need to leave and take an offer somewhere else? I'm curious to see how that will shake out moving forward. What level of frustration does it cause or send to the others that want to negotiate with the Red Wings when you don't take care of your own? That's the perception that's starting to be created when you negotiate that way and you don't take care of a guy that has been considered one of your own homegrown guys. And it kind of lends to, what does Steve Yzerman really think about Dylan Larkin? Very interesting. I want to see what that potentially is going to entail. How does that shake out? So I'm curious to see how the negotiation hits ahead. I wish we could fast forward 3 weeks to get inside that room to see how Dylan Larkin and the agent and Steve Yzerman come to the agreement. Does Steve Yzerman put the rumors out there maybe that a trade will take place? I don't know. But I'm curious to hear about how this and how this is going to shake out. It's something interesting because, in my opinion, Dylan Larkin's, I'm with Steve Yzerman. At this point in time, I'm with management. I don't think he's done anything to really give anybody pause that he doesn't know what he's doing in the draft, that he's been unfair, or, does he get treated like Steven Stamkos? Does he get treated like another young talent that maybe is lesser than? Now, obviously, you're not going to pay him like Connor McDavid, like he's one of the game's greats at over $10 million. But can you justify paying him $9 million over 8 years? Maybe they come to an agreement and he'll take less years for more money. That's also an option. It's another option that you wait and you gamble at the end of the year. So you got to pay attention to what the Wings are doing here. That is the predominant story. It's unfortunate. It's trending right now that the Wings are not going to make the postseason coming out of the All-Star break, even after the time off. Losing to Edmonton, you got to see the talent, the difference in talent and what the Wings still need. They still need a couple more guys to develop. They need goal scorers. They need just a little bit of an upgrade and infusion of talent across each line. You need one new member of each line, 4 new players. And, if you could get, Tyler Bertuzzi healthy, if you can get more contributions, increased development. But it's looking and trending like this Red Wings team is not going to make the postseason, and I wonder how much is this negotiation a distraction for the Red Wings. We'll see if and this is one of the first key decisions that Steve Yzerman's got to make, and let's see. I trust that he'll make it, but let's see if there's a misstep. Follow Detroit Sports Podcast at Detroit Podcast. Make sure everybody you subscribe and like and tell everybody that you know that you listen and subscribe to one of the premier podcast networks in town, the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. DocNJock's coming to a close. Next week, we'll bring back Adam, recap his vacation, and continue our talks in free agency, the draft, all things in regarding to prospects and things with the Lions, Wings, Tigers, and Pistons as we explore the world of Detroit sports in 2023. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I appreciate your time. Thanks for downloading the latest edition of Doc and Jock.